Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about unless. It's a lesson from Pioneer Success Unit, booklet page 10 and your student book page 60. First of all, I'm gonna define unless. Unless it's a conjunction, which means if not, and it's a conjunction we can use it in all of the conditional sentences. If you remember that we've talked about type 1, type 2, zero type, in all of these conditional sentences we use if not, if it is negative. So the same thing we can use unless. Now let's move to the examples to make the thing clear for you. Example number 1, as you notice that we have the here the red part and here the purple one. Let's try to differentiate and find the difference between these two forms. The example is we'll go for a picnic by the river tomorrow if it doesn't rain. Now in this one we use the form if not. But not only if not, when we use not, the negative form, we need an auxiliary verb, which is here does, because it's simple present tense. But in number 2, or the second one, we'll go for a picnic by the river tomorrow unless it rains. Unless it rains. The first one, we said if it doesn't rain, but with unless, what do we use? Unless it rains. Can you notice the difference? Actually, it's very clear. Now with if not, we use the auxiliary verb does, as we mentioned, but and for sure the base form of the verb, infinitive verb, after does. But when we have to use unless, or when we want to use unless, now we don't use the negative form, so we don't have auxiliary verb, so we use only the affirmative verb, which is rains. That's why we say unless it rains. Now let's move to another example. Example number 2, they wouldn't come if you didn't invite them. They wouldn't come if you didn't invite them. With if, we again use the auxiliary verb here, did. Actually, we use did because it's simple past tense. Didn't invite. But look at the second one. They wouldn't come unless you invited them. You invited them. Now with unless, we don't use negative as we mentioned, so we use the affirmative form of the verb. The affirmative form of the verb in the simple past tense, it's verb to or verb with ed. So no need for did and not. And this is the main difference between these two forms, if not and unless. With unless, we don't need negative form because we will have double negative, but with if we use the negative form not. That's why we have to use auxiliary verb. Now let's move to the first exercise. The first exercise to rewrite the sentences using unless. So we're going to rewrite these sentences using unless. Now, if you notice in number 1, 2, 3, we have 3 sentences. I just wrote the red parts. These red parts, which means that we will not make any changes in these parts. We only change the part of if not to change it into unless. For example, number 1, you will be sick. Okay, you will be sick. We just have it in this sentence. We don't make any changes. if you don't stop eating. So we're gonna change if you don't stop eating. How? Let's do and let's write the answer. You will be sick unless you stop eating. So what did we do here? We only omit the auxiliary verb do with not because we don't need negative, and we use the verb one of stop with the subject you because it's simply present sentence. That's it. Now let's do number 2. Okay. If he wasn't ill, wasn't very ill, he would be at work. He would be at work. But we're gonna change this part, which is if he wasn't very ill. So we will start with change if not to unless. Unless he was very ill. Unless he was very ill, he would be at work. If you notice here, we have verb to be was in the past tense, طبعا was, and the verb to be, we use the negative with it, wasn't, in this way. So we only delete the negative form, only not. Now, let's move to number 3. What are we going to do in number 3? Number 3, I wouldn't eat that food if I wasn't that hungry. I will have the same part, which is this part. I wouldn't eat that food without any changes. Now the part I'm going to change it if I wasn't that hungry. I will say unless I was that hungry. So we only delete again the negative form, which is not. Now let's move to the next exercise. The next exercise to rewrite the the sentences using if. Now we have sentences with unless, and we're going to change them into if. For sure, if not, because the synonym of unless, if not. Now let's start with number 1. Unless you save money, you won't be able to go on vacation. When we want to use if not, we will use the negative form, which means we need auxiliary verb, and we may do some changes in the verb. So let's start with answering number 1. I will say if you don't save money. You save money if you don't save money, comma, you won't be able to go on vacation. So this is how do we change it from unless to if not. Let's do number two. Number two, I would arrive at 10 unless there was traffic. So the conditional part, unless there was traffic. So how do we change it? What are we going to do? We will say I would arrive at 10 if we need the negative form. Where do we use it? We will use it with verb to be for sure, which is was. If there wasn't traffic. I hope that you've got the idea of unless and if not, and the changes that we have, and how do we change from unless to if not, or from if not to unless. Now we're going to do another exercise. We're going to do another exercise, which is to rewrite the sentences before doing another exercise. We're gonna have, let's say, a brief or a conclusion about the form of unless and if not. Here we are, the conclusion. The conclusion is, conclusion number one, changing from if not to unless, the negative will be omitted. So when we want to change from if not, we have the negative for not. When we want to use unless and change to unless, we will delete or we will omit the negative form. But when we want to change from unless to if, the negative not will be added, supposed to be added, for sure, with an auxiliary verb such as do, does, did, in simple tenses, simple present or simple past. Now, let's talk about another exercise. This exercise, it's a mixture between unless and if not. Now we will check each one of these sentences and find out what are we going to change it from unless to if not, or from if not to unless. Now let's read number one. I don't want you to give that number to anyone unless it's an emergency. You understand? So here's the sentence using unless. Using unless. Let's see. What are we going to do? We will say I don't want you to give that number to anyone. I'm gonna change the part of unless. Unless I will say if it isn't. If it isn't an emergency, you understand. So we changed only the part of unless to if not. If it isn't an emergency, you understand. Now let's do number 2. Number 2, I would help unless I had a flu or I had a cold. I would help unless, so I will change from unless to if not. I would help if I didn't have. So we've changed the affirmative form of had to negative form, didn't have. If I didn't have a cold. Now let's do number 3. I won't pay if you don't provide the goods immediately. So I'm gonna change the part of if you don't. So I will say I won't pay unless you, so you don't provide. We will omit the not with do and only use the verb 1, which is provide. Provide the goods immediately. Now, number 4, she would be here if she wasn't stuck in traffic. I will say if she wasn't. So I will change from if to unless. Unless she was stuck in traffic. So this is our lesson for today. I hope that you enjoyed this lesson. It's simple and easy and related to your previous lesson, conditional sentences. Thank you all. Have a nice day.